You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The cabin materialized from the mist as Elias coaxed the car up the final, rutted incline, anticipation a nervous knot tightening in his gut. He cut the engine, the silence rushing in, profound and immediate. Outside, the air hung thick and damp, clinging like a shroud, carrying the scent of sodden earth and decaying leaves on its breath. Fog, a relentless white miasma, had shadowed his long ascent, swallowing the landscape whole. His fingers, still curled from their tenacious grip on the wheel, felt stiff and alien. Before the ancient wooden door, he hesitated, then pushed inward, letting the threshold's gloom swallow him momentarily before his hand found the switch, summoning a weak bloom from the single overhead bulb. Within lay a cavernous living space, flanked by a diminutive kitchen alcove and dissected by a narrow staircase spiraling towards a loft. Silhouettes of time-worn furniture hugged the walls, skeletal in the stark light. Each step Elias took sent protesting groans echoing from the floorboards beneath his heavy boots. The place exhaled abandonment, yet bore no marks of violation, only settled dust and stillness. He lowered his duffel, testing the integrity of the chairs. One gave a precarious wobble. A film of gray coated every surface, the walls whispering of dust, the air near the windows thick with the faint, cloying signature of mildew. A swipe of his hand across a tabletop left his fingertips grimy. In the kitchen nook, the faucet coughed and sputtered before yielding a grudging trickle of water. The stove, a relic of forgotten decades, stood cold. The cupboards gaped, mostly vacant save for a few chipped plates and mugs, startlingly clean amidst the decay. Elias traversed the main room, his gaze drawn to the staircase. It climbed steeply, each riser releasing a small, sharp pop under pressure. Ascending, he found the loft a cramped affair, the ceiling pressing low, containing only a naked metal bed frame. Near it, another door, presumably leading to attic crawl space or sealed storage, resisted his touch, stubbornly stuck fast. He didn't persist. Prying wasn't his purpose here. Solitude was the quarry. Downstairs again, he unfurled his sleeping bag near the hearth, beside which lay a promising stack of firewood. He tested a few logs, dry enough. Soon, the patient work of coaxing flame paid off. Firelight blossomed, crackling and spitting, casting dancing shadows, and bathing his face in a welcome, gentle heat. His agenda was simple, days adrift from distraction, embraced by the quiet he craved, the solitude he found more comforting than crowded spaces. Rest, perhaps some aimless wandering through the fog-bound woods, an attempt to unscour his mind. Nothing more than a tranquil refuge was sought. The first day bled away uneventfully. Elias paced the confines of the cabin, inspected window seals against the perpetual damp, organized his meager provisions. Outside, the fog remained an impenetrable curtain. As dusk seeped through the panes, he lit candles brought from home, preferring their flickering intimacy to the cabin's untested lanterns. Later, cocooned in his sleeping bag near the hearth's warm glow, the fire murmuring its descent into embers, he listened. Only the ceaseless sighing of the wind through unseen branches, the occasional snap of a twig, reached his ears. Sleep began its soft encroachment, his eyelids growing heavy. Then, a whisper of sound from above, a faint pressure, the ghost of a footfall overhead. Elias's eyes snapped open, his body instantly rigid. The loft lay directly above him. Old timbers settling, he reasoned, the structure breathing in the night air. It came again, sharper this time, unmistakable. The deliberate compression of a single complaining floorboard. His heart commenced a heavy drumming against his ribs. He stared fixedly at the rough-hewn ceiling, breath held captive, waiting. Silence stretched. Then, another step, a slow, deliberate creak. He swallowed against a suddenly dry throat, forcing the rational explanation. Wind, temperature shifts, the house groaning in its sleep. His eyes ached from staring into the dimness, but nothing further stirred. Exhaustion eventually claimed him, pulling him under. Morning arrived with a stiff neck and the visible puff of his breath in the frigid air. The fire was a landscape of cold ash. Sitting up, Elias scanned the room. Everything remained precisely as he'd left it. No alien prints disturbed the dust. No hint of forced entry marred the door or windows. He tried to dismiss the tendrils of unease. Opening the front door invited a swirl of dense, pearlescent fog. Moisture beaded instantly on his jacket. The chill air bit, making his eyes water. He decided on a brief circuit of the cabin's exterior. The ground yielded softly beneath his boots, a sodden sponge. He listened intently, but the woods remained unnervingly silent, devoid of birdsong. It was as if the world itself held its breath around this isolated structure. Back inside, the hiss of the camp stove brewing coffee offered scant comfort. He sat at the table, sipping the bitter liquid from a chipped mug, the memory of the nocturnal sounds replaying, unwelcome guests in his thoughts. One part of him yearned to label them imagination's phantoms. Another couldn't shake their distinctness. Coffee finished, he sought refuge in activity, wiping down surfaces, chasing dust motes. He rechecked the windows. The frames felt damp, but held firm. The plan: keep busy, keep the encroaching disquiet at bay. That afternoon, he became aware of the cabin's subtler voice. Soft, intermittent popping sounds emanated from the walls, wood contracting surely. The floorboards creaked underfoot, expectedly, but sometimes a different sound surfaced, almost a sigh, a brief, quiet exhalation seeming to drift from the room's shadowed corners. He'd freeze, listening, eyes flicking towards the source, finding nothing. The cabin seemed possessed of its own respiration. He wrestled his focus back to practicalities. The small radio he'd brought remained stubbornly silent, starved of signal. He ate cold rations from a can, mapping out a simple evening meal. As darkness reclaimed the windows, he rebuilt the fire, its flames a more robust bastion against the gloom. Candles were positioned strategically, sentinels of light casting fluid, dancing shadows upon the walls. He settled near the hearth, attempting to lose himself in an old, yellowed magazine unearthed from a drawer, its articles echoes from a bygone era. Yet his attention frayed, his gaze repeatedly straying to the room's periphery, alert for any sign that his solitude was shared. The wind offered its lonely accompaniment. The fire crackled, flared, subsided. Eventually, weary eyes protesting, he stood, stretching cramped muscles. Time for rest. He unrolled the sleeping bag once more, placing a single candle on a low stool nearby, a concession to safety traded for the comfort of light. His eyelids drooped, consciousness blurring, then an almost imperceptible shift in the room's equilibrium. The candle flame wavered violently. The walls issued a low groan, and from somewhere overhead, a deeper, resonant sigh. Elias sat bolt upright, heart hammering. In that instant, the candle beside him extinguished. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, struggling to penetrate the sudden, profound darkness, relieved only by the faint, dying pulse of embers in the fireplace. A visceral chill traced its path across his skin. The wind rattled the window panes, yes, but this felt different, internal. His pulse surged, a frantic bird trapped in his chest. Slowly, deliberately, he rose, one hand braced on the floor. His breathing grew shallow, rapid. His mouth felt like sandpaper. A sound tore through the silence, a dry, dragging friction from the loft. The noise evoked a chair leg being scraped unwillingly across bare wood. Elias found himself at the base of the stairs, staring into the impenetrable blackness above. He listened, straining. A faint shuffling drifted down, the hesitant cadence of slow, measured footsteps crossing the loft floor. Vertigo threatened, yet he forced himself to speak, his voice emerging as a cracked whisper. A simple greeting, pitched into the void, half hoping for silence, half dreading a reply. None came. His throat constricted, legs turning traitorously weak. He retreated, stumbling back to the relative sanctuary of his sleeping bag, pulling it around him like armor, eyes locked on the dark maw of the staircase, until sheer, bone-deep fatigue dragged him under once more. The following dawn brought the same biting cold, the same ache in his back from the hard floor. He rose, rubbing circulation back into his arms. A glance towards the stairs revealed nothing amiss. On the stool, the candle had wept a thick rivulet of wax down its side, pooling on the wood. He poked absently at the fireplace ashes, his mind replaying the scraping, the shuffling. It hadn't been imagined. He had heard footsteps. The day unfolded under a pall of nervous tension. He forced down bread and more tinned food. His appetite vanished. He compelled himself outdoors, into the persistent fog, needing movement, air. The cabin's shape dissolved behind him within yards as he picked his way across the hillside. Trees loomed close, their trunks slick and dark with moisture. The silence was vast, broken only by the rustle of wind-stirred branches and, once, the distant crack of a falling limb. He walked until the landscape became utterly unfamiliar, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest, then hurried back, the sight of the cabin through the mist bringing a perverse sense of relief mingled with dread. Late afternoon saw the temperature plummet. Shivering even indoors, Elias diligently built another fire. While it caught, he prowled the cabin, a restless energy propelling him. He checked every corner, peered under furniture, and, on impulse, ascended again to the loft. He tried the stuck door once more, pushing with his shoulder, arms straining. It remained resolutely sealed, feeling almost held. A clammy dampness broke out on his palms as they gripped the knob. He released it, breathing heavily, trying very hard not to speculate about what lay sequestered behind the unyielding wood. Evening descended. He lit more candles than before, placing them at the stair base, on the table, near his sleeping bag. Small islands of light in the encroaching dark, Seated before the fire, he watched the flames writhe, his thoughts a frantic whirl. A hidden animal? A human intruder, impossibly stealthy? Or was his own mind fracturing under the weight of isolation and suggestion? He fought sleep, determined to remain vigilant. Around midnight, he registered the change. The candle flames began to dip and flutter, not from any discernible draught, but as if the air itself had thickened, grown heavy. Then, faint as moth wings against his ear, a whisper. His name, Elias, repeated, seeming to emanate from the very walls around him. Every muscle locked. It wasn't imagined. It brushed past him, intimate and chilling. He surged to his feet, legs nearly buckling. His heart pounded a frantic tattoo against his ribs. He uttered something aloud, a denial, a command he couldn't recall, into the charged silence. Abruptly, the candle on the table winked out. Then the one near the stairs sputtered and died. The fine hairs on his arms prickled upright. He snatched the last remaining candle, holding it aloft, his hand trembling so violently the small flame shivered in sympathy. A floorboard groaned softly, distinctly behind him, a cold fist clenched in his stomach. He spun around, eyes wide, searching the gloom. Nothing visible, yet the palpable sense of presence was overwhelming, a silent weight moving across the floor. His mouth was utterly dry. He backed away instinctively until his shoulders met the rough planking of the wall. Primal instinct screamed, "Run!" Flee out the front door into the fog, but his body was a leaden statue. Pinned against the wood, he watched his last candle flicker, gasp, and surrender to the darkness, plunged into absolute black. His own ragged breathing sounded impossibly loud in the sudden void. The cabin seemed alive now, whispering with soft clicks and creaks from every direction. And beneath it all, faint but undeniable, the rhythmic sound of respiration that was not his own. His hand groped blindly, finding the back of a nearby chair, gripping it like an anchor. Fumbling in his pocket, his fingers closed around the familiar shape of his lighter, thumb scraping flint, once, twice. A tiny spark, then a hesitant flame sprang to life, pushing back the oppressive darkness by mere inches. He stumbled towards the hearth, the small light guiding him, and managed to place a sliver of kindling onto the embers. Puffing gently, coaxing, praying. A small lick of fire caught, grew tentatively. He knelt there, lighter still, clutched tight, every nerve singing with tension, listening for footsteps, for breath. The fire crackled, strengthening, casting a wider, though still fragile circle of light. He waited, straining his ears against the pounding in his chest. A minute crawled by, then another. The sense of proximity remained, a watcher just beyond the firelight, yet unseen. Sweat beaded on his face, incongruous in the chill air. Gradually, the immediate tension in the room seemed to recede slightly, the oppressive weight lifting. The fire's soft glow illuminated the area around the hearth. Elias rose, knees trembling, and scanned the room. The stairs were empty. The front door remained closed. He wiped his damp forehead, fighting to regulate his breathing. His hands felt slick. Retrieving his flashlight from beside the sleeping bag, he thumbed it on, the beam slicing through the gloom. He swept it across the floor, the walls. Nothing. No footprints in the dust, no marks, no tangible evidence of the night's terror. His teeth began to chatter, partly from cold, mostly, he knew, from fear. Sleep was impossible. He spent the remainder of the night with his back pressed against the warm stones of the fireplace, flashlight clutched in one hand, lighter in the other. Periodically, the flames would dip, demanding more wood. The small task, a welcome distraction. His nerves were frayed wires. Every settling creak of the cabin, every sigh of the wind, made him jump. The whispering returned intermittently, never distinct words, just sibilant murmurs that seemed to shape his name, sometimes from behind the walls, sometimes seeming to drift down from the loft above. His scalp tingled with each recurrence. He clung to the tangible sensations, the fire's heat on his skin, the sharp resinous scent of burning wood, anchors in a sea of encroaching dread. When the first weak grey light of morning filtered through the grimy windows, painting the cabin's interior in drab relief, a hollow sort of exhaustion washed over him. He forced himself to eat, though his stomach churned and swallowing felt difficult. His hands shook too badly to hold the mug steady. A decision had crystallized in the crucible of the night. He had come seeking peace, a quiet untangling of thoughts. This place offered only the opposite, a tightening knot of fear. He began to pack, movements quick, efficient, folding the sleeping bag, gathering the candle stubs, clearing away his meager trash. All the while, the cabin seemed to observe him, a prickling sensation crawling up his spine, the urge to look over his shoulder almost irresistible. He felt that lingering longer might fray the last threads of his sanity. The feeling of something unseen, just beyond the periphery, never entirely left him. Outside, the air was raw, biting. The fog clung stubbornly to the hillside, a damp, grey shroud. He loaded the car, slammed the trunk shut, and cast one final look back at the cabin. Its dark wood and weathered lines blurred into the mist, becoming indistinct, almost spectral. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine's rumble felt both intrusive and reassuring. A sudden wave of anxiety surged, the feeling of finalizing something irrevocable. His pulse leaped, sweat slicked his temples. He put the car in reverse, easing it away, down the treacherous slope. Driving, he kept his eyes fixed on the winding track ahead. The wind gusted, sending the fog swirling across the path like phantom dancers. Once, only once, he risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The cabin's roofline was a vague silhouette, already receding, being swallowed by the white oblivion. His mouth remained parched, his knuckles white where they gripped the wheel. He pressed onward, needing distance, escape. The whispers were gone now, but the frantic cadence of his heart persisted. A lingering unease remained, as if the cabin's sentience trailed him, waiting just around the next fog-blinded curve. Further down the hill, the world began to reassert itself. The oppressive fog thinned, revealing patches of bruised sky. Gradually, the tension coiled in his shoulders started to unwind. His breathing steadied, deepened. He realized he'd barely blinked for miles. He took several slow, deliberate breaths, focusing solely on the road. By the time he reached the blessed asphalt of the main highway, sensation had returned to his numb fingers. A profound, weary ache settled deep in his bones, his eyes burning from sleeplessness and strain. He made a silent vow. Never again. No return to that place of echoing footsteps and whispered names. No more nights spent sensing an unseen watcher in the suffocating dark. The retreat he'd envisioned had dissolved into something far more consuming, a descent into a tension deeper than any he'd known before. Even now, miles and hours away, the images remained sharp. The oppressive shadows, the stuck loft door, the sound of floorboards creaking overhead. He couldn't shake the chilling certainty of that presence, standing silently behind him in the blackness, studying his fear. The cabin had released his body, but its chill lingered in the recesses of his mind, a silent, waiting entity. He had no intention of ever giving it another chance. The graveyard shift at the desolate Horizon fuel stop on County Road K beckoned, a siren call of necessity drowning out my better judgment. Pennies were tight, you see. Perched on the ragged fringe of nowhere, it promised solitude and, supposedly, simplicity. Mind the till, watch the pumps, assist the sparse nocturnal traffic. What could go wrong? Elias, the chap I was relieving, muttered something about the place having quirks after midnight, a warning I'd dismissed as hazing. 10 o'clock struck, swallowing the last vestiges of daylight. For hours, the only companions were the drone of the ancient coolers and the dust motes dancing in the fluorescent glare. Sporadic headlights pierced the gloom, depositing solitary figures seeking fuel or stale coffee, brief transactions punctuating the vast quiet. Mostly, I occupied the worn stool behind the counter, flipping through a tattered car magazine, my gaze habitually flicking to the bank of grainy security monitors. Then, somewhere past the witching hour, maybe 1-ish, the air thickened. The silence grew teeth, pressing inward, dismissing it as late-night jitters endemic to lonely outposts. I tried to focus on my reading. A brittle tinkle from the bell, slung above the entryway, shattered the stillness. I looked up, empty threshold, closed door, the windless night outside undisturbed. An anomaly, perhaps? A stray vibration? But minutes later, tinkle again, sharper this time. A tremor, cold and unwelcome, traced the length of my spine. I rose, circumnavigated the counter, peered down the aisles stacked high with chips and motor oil. Vacancy stared back. Shrugging with forced nonchalance, attributing it to faulty wiring, I reclaimed my perch. Soon after, a dry, insistent scrup emanated from aisle 3, the domain of sugary drinks and beef jerky. Like rough stone dragged across linoleum, rhythmic, grating, echoing slightly in the unnatural hush. My pulse quickened, clutching the heavy metal flashlight kept beneath the counter, its beam cutting a nervous swath through the dimness. I ventured forth. Rounding the corner into aisle 3, I swept the light across the Technicolor packaging. Nothing. The sound ceased abruptly, leaving only the refrigerator hum and the low buzz of the overhead lights. Retreating to my post, my gaze drifted again to the monitors, cycling through the various camera feeds, pumps, storefront, interior angles. One displayed the rear of the building, the dumpster enclosure, a couple of dented storage bins, and there, huddled just beyond the spill of the weak security lamp, merging with the deeper shadows, stood a form, indistinct, utterly still. I squinted, leaning closer to the screen. A transient seeking shelter? Some local kid playing chicken? Grabbing the flashlight once more, I unbolted the back door and stepped into the cool, sharp air. The service area lay deserted, bathed in pale moonlight. The only sound was the skittering of dry leaves across the asphalt. I played the beam over the dumpster, into the recesses between the bins. Nothing. A prickle of primal fear, the body's intuition screaming that things were fundamentally wrong, tightened my chest. Taking a ragged breath, I retreated inside, the heavy click of the deadbolt echoing with unnerving finality. Behind the counter's dubious safety, paranoia began its insidious crawl. Every settling creak of the old building became a footstep, every whisper of the ventilation a disembodied murmur just beyond hearing. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz with accusatory energy. Solitude curdled into the suffocating sense of being watched. Around 3 a.m. the bell chimed again, sharp and definite. My head snapped up, braced for emptiness. But he was there, standing directly before the counter. Tall, draped in a long, dark coat, the deep cowl of a hood casting his face into absolute shadow. His hands rested on the worn formica, fingers unnaturally long, pale, almost skeletal. "Something I can get for you?" My voice emerged a thin reed, fragile in the heavy air. Silence answered, thick and suffocating. I felt, rather than saw, a gaze pinning me from the cowl's abyss, cold and intent. The quiet stretched, taut as wire. "Need something?" I tried again, my voice barely a whisper. Slowly, deliberately, one pale hand lifted, index finger extending, pointing with unnerving precision towards the shadowed rear of the store, past the aisles. A reflexive glance over my shoulder revealed only rows of brightly packaged emptiness, the back wall indistinct in the gloom. When my eyes snapped forward again, the space before me was vacant. No chime heralded his departure, no whisper of receding footsteps, just absence, sudden and complete. The monitors showed only sterile emptiness. Panic coiled icy in my gut. My breath hitched, hands trembling as I scanned the silent store. I desperately wanted to flee, to abandon this island of fluorescent light, marooned in the dark. But the thought of leaving the till unattended warred with raw terror. I rationalized, a prank, some elaborate gag, but the feeling, visceral and chilling, refuted logic. The remaining hours bled together in a fugue state of hypervigilance. Every flicker of movement outside the windows, every distant engine sound, sent jolts through my system. Dawn's tentative light was a reprieve, and when the morning relief, a stout woman named Martha, arrived, I offered only mumbled pleasantries before practically sprinting to my car. My hands shook on the steering wheel all the way home, the night's events replaying in a terrifying loop. I swore I wouldn't return, that I'd find work elsewhere, anywhere less steeped in strangeness. Yet a week dissolved, and the grim calculus of survival, rent versus sanity, drew me back. Bills waited for no ghost. This time, armament, a small crackling transistor radio, spitting out tinny rock anthems like feeble talismans against the encroaching dark. I kept the volume low, a fragile barrier of noise. Hours ticked by, deceptively placid, almost mundane. I nearly convinced myself the previous week had been a waking nightmare born of fatigue. Then, near 2, the phantom tinkle echoed from the door, mocking my fragile peace. My stomach plummeted, followed shortly by that sound. Scrape! Scrape! Slithering from aisle 2 this time, the snack chip domain. Louder now, more deliberate, closer. I froze, listening, heart hammering against my ribs. Flashlight trembling in my grip, I forced myself up, edging towards the aisle, the radio's cheerful tune suddenly obscene. The scraping persisted, slow, methodical. As I reached the aisle's entrance, it stopped. Silence crashed back in. I scanned the shelves, the floor, empty. Turning to retreat, a glacial exhalation, impossibly cold, ghosted across the nape of my neck, raising every hair. I whirled, flashlight beam slashing wildly, heart seizing. Nothing but air thick with menace. Scrabbling back to the counter, gasping, my eyes shot instinctively to the monitors, and froze. Screen 4, the dumpster view. The silhouette stood stark against the grainy night, faceless within its hood, motionless, undeniably watching. That was the severance point. Keys, wallet, jacket, snatched in a single fluid motion of pure flight. The front door slammed behind me as I plunged into the pre-dawn chill, not daring a backward glance. The lonely ribbon of County Road K swallowed my taillights. I tendered my resignation via phone call the following dawn, offering no explanation Martha would believe. My knuckles whiten on the wheel's worn vinyl, a reflexive clench as my eyes dart, almost against my will, to the rearview mirror. There it is again, a flicker, a deepening of shadow on the back seat, gone the instant I try to focus on the physical space behind me. Nothing resides there. Nothing ever truly resides there. Yet a tension coils in my neck, a familiar tightening, and my arms prickle as if brushed by unseen static. Delivering packages, navigating these lonely routes for years, I'd grown accustomed to solitude, even cherished the quiet hum of the engine, the autonomy. But lately, a profound disquiet has settled in. This decrepit van, my mobile workspace, breathes an unsettling air, and the dread mounts, whispering that this solitary existence might be unsustainable. 6 months past, I acquired this vessel from a sun-baked used car lot. The salesman, all vague gestures and averted eyes, mentioned a prior owner, an accident some months before. Details remained elusive, lost in the scent of aged upholstery and the ghost of spilled, stale coffee that permeated the interior. The headliner droops like a weary eyelid. A tear in the driver's seat fabric occasionally snags my thigh. Cracks spiderweb across the dashboard, the radio a temperamental beast spitting static more often than music. It was, however, the sum total of my affordability, essential for hauling the boxes and crates defining my livelihood. Initially, it performed its duties without complaint. No ominous rattles, no sudden stalls. It cleared inspection, guzzled a bit of oil, but nothing alarming. It was functional, a start. The first tremor of the uncanny arrived during a pre-dawn run. Leaving the warehouse near 5, swallowed by the lingering night, the streets were vacant arteries illuminated only by the sodium glare of street lamps, and my own headlamps cutting through the gloom. A faint rustling emanated from the back, the sound of fabric shifting, disturbed. A glance in the mirror revealed a form, indistinct yet undeniably present, slumped forward in the center of the bench seat. My heart lurched. I spun around, eyes wide. Emptiness greeted me. The seat sat vacant, the belt a limp ribbon across the cushion. Turning back, the mirror showed only the mundane reality. Just fatigue, I reasoned, shaking my head. Insufficient caffeine. For a time, denial served. I immersed myself in the rhythm of the job. The early starts, loading the van, deciphering manifests, plotting routes, hitting the asphalt labyrinth. 30 stops some days, fewer on others, dictated by package size or the sprawl between towns. At first, the anomaly was infrequent, a fleeting peripheral disturbance, a trick of light, a figment born of exhaustion. That's what I told myself, even as a cold knot tightened in my gut. Over lukewarm coffee in the small staff room, amidst vending machines and a scarred table, I ventured to speak of it to Marco and Lenny, described the shape, the jolt of fear it induced. Laughter met my confession. "Dude, probably your jacket's slipping," Marco offered, dismissive. "Too much solo time, Silas," Lenny added, grinning. "Get a driving buddy." Jokes followed about self-inflicted scares, about the phantoms conjured by sleep-deprived eyes on long hauls. I forced a chuckle, played along, but the unease remained, a persistent, indigestible lump. Weeks bled into months, and the appearances escalated. Now, even bathed in the unambiguous light of afternoon, navigating bustling streets, a dark contour would bloom in the mirror. My legs would stiffen, my grip on the wheel becoming a vice. A swift look back, always. The seat was bare. I'd try to dismiss it, yet the van itself felt heavier, burdened by an unseen passenger. I even checked the tires, the suspension, seeking a mechanical explanation for the perceived weight. Everything appeared normal. On rain-lashed evening, concluding my final delivery around 7, the sky bruised purple-black. Slick roads mirrored the gloom, the windshield constantly fogging. Weariness gnawed at me. Hunger echoed it. Pulling up to the customer's address, a poorly lit complex, necessitating my phone's flashlight to navigate the puddles. I felt it as I approached the rear doors, a peculiar chill. Opening them, the van's interior exhaled a coldness starkly different from the damp air outside. My breath plumed visibly in the phone's beam. Illogical. The engine still ticked, usually retaining some warmth. Shrugging it off, I retrieved the box, my hands trembling slightly, nearly fumbling the package. Delivery made, curt goodnights exchanged, I returned to the driver's seat. Droplets beaded on the rearview mirror's surface, inside the glass, like damp fingerprints left by an unseen hand. The rest of the windows were dry internally. Only that mirror. My chest constricted. I snatched a rag from the passenger side, wiped the moisture away fiercely. A glance confirmed the rear seat's vacancy. Closing my eyes, inhaling deeply, I commanded calm. The drive back to the warehouse was fraught, an insistent itch crawling up my neck, the phantom sensation of breath near my ear. The following day dawned uneventfully. I braced for the mirror's betrayal, but the shape withheld its presence until midday, on a sun-drenched highway, stretched between towns. Checking the mirror for a lane change, I saw it. A dark silhouette filling the space behind me. Tall, perhaps leaning toward the window. A strangled cry escaped me as I yanked the wheel. The van lurched violently rightward, tires screaming, narrowly avoiding a collision with a startled sedan driver, whose horn blared indignantly. I wrestled the vehicle straight, eyes locked forward, heart hammering against my ribs, hands slick with sweat. Slowing, I took the next exit, pulling into a gas station's corner refuge. Turning, I scanned the back. Nothing, just emptiness. I scrubbed a hand over my face, willing the tremors to cease. My shirt clung, damp. Faces at the pumps turned towards my erratic parking. Exiting, I slammed the door, pacing the van's perimeter, seeking normalcy in the mundane checks of tire pressure. Opening the side door revealed only the familiar stains, the small upholstery tear, lunch crumbs, the faint odor of damp cardboard, nothing overtly sinister. I kicked a tire, a futile gesture against the rising tide of paranoia. Getting back in, I finished the route, nerves frayed to snapping point. Sleep that night was a battlefield, the shape migrating from the van to the corners of my bedroom, a silent, watching presence. Desperate measures followed. A small towel draped over the offending mirror became my shield. I mumbled excuses to Mr. Henderson about cracks, pending replacements. He cared little so long as the deliveries continued. Driving half-blind felt precarious, yet offered a fragile reprieve. The shape remained unseen, a measure of calm returning. But lane changes demanded the mirror. Each brief uncovering brought back the suffocating unease. Mostly, it stayed covered. Selling the van wasn't feasible. Payments remained, and alternatives were beyond my means. Marco and Lenny's teasing continued, their disbelief a constant refrain. "Listen to tunes, man," they advised. "Podcasts. Distract yourself." I tried, flooding the cabin with rock anthems, rambling talk shows. The noise filled the space but couldn't banish the chilling certainty that I wasn't alone. One thick afternoon, caught in the slow crawl of city traffic, 10 miles per hour down the boulevard, the acrid smell of cigarette smoke bloomed in the confined space. I don't smoke. The windows were sealed, AC humming, yet the scent was fresh, potent, as if someone had just lit up directly behind me. I killed the AC. The smell lingered, thick and invasive. A glance in the side mirror showed nothing amiss. Risking the rear view, the towel forgotten, left down, I saw it. The shape. Closer now, looming just behind my seat. My heart seized, trapped bumper to bumper, escape impossible. Sweat beaded on my forehead, tracing cold paths down my temples. The radio droned, suddenly distant, muffled. The dark outline remained static, an obsidian presence. Then, a horn blast. Traffic was moving, and I hadn't registered it. Foot stabbing the accelerator, I lurched forward. Another glance. Gone. The cigarette phantom vanished with it. My shoulders slumped in relief, but my breath came in shallow gasps, hands still locked in a trembling grip on the wheel. At the earliest opportunity, I pulled into a grocery store lot, finding a secluded corner. My stomach churned. Leaning my forehead against the steering wheel, I whispered, "Enough. This has to be enough." Sips from a water bottle steadied me slightly. 3 stops remained. The paycheck beckoned. But a decision crystallized. After work, I'd approach Henderson, plead for a temporary reprieve in a company vehicle. Perhaps distance would lend perspective. Confirm if this was merely frayed nerves or something more sinister. That evening, citing nebulous mechanical troubles, I made my case. Henderson grudgingly agreed to a few days in a company van, stressing its temporary nature. Those vehicles, larger, newer, were reserved. My personal van issue needed swift resolution. Relief washed over me as I drove the company truck. Functional AC, a clear sound system, blessedly empty rearview mirrors. No spectral silhouettes, no phantom smoke, no encroaching cold. A few days later, Henderson inquired about my van's status. I lied, claimed it fixed. The reprieve ended. The company vehicle was needed elsewhere. My stomach plummeted. That night, the keys on my kitchen table seemed to pulse with latent menace. The next morning, sliding into my old van, I hesitated before turning the ignition. A long scan of the back seat confirmed its emptiness. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared reluctantly to life. A short route today, mostly local. For 2 hours, blessed normalcy reigned. Perhaps the break had reset my psyche. Then, approaching a familiar intersection, the light turned red. Slowing, checking mirrors, side then rear view. It was back, larger, closer than ever, consuming most of the reflected space. Ice traced patterns on my scalp. My breath hitched. Green light. I drove through, pulse hammering in my throat. I refused to look again, fixing my gaze rigidly ahead, ignoring the mirror's silent testimony. My hands tingled, numb from the pressure of my grip. A scream built in my chest, urging me to pull over, abandon the van, run. Last package delivered, I drove straight back to the warehouse, bypassing colleagues, clocking out in silence. The drive home was a torment of furtive glances at the mirror, each peak revealing emptiness but offering no comfort. The feeling persisted, a tangible pressure against the back of my seat. Parked before my apartment building, engines silenced, the streetlights casting wavering pools of light, I felt it distinctly, a subtle push against the seat back, the sound of fabric rubbing against itself. My eyes shot to the mirror. A split second, the unmistakable outline of head and shoulders, stark and still, then gone. I nearly bolted, but forced a semblance of calm, rolling up windows, locking doors, stepping out onto unsteady legs. The climb to my apartment felt like scaling a mountain. Sleep was elusive, fractured by visions of the silhouette, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Now I sit on my couch, the van keys inert on the coffee table. The memories loop, the invasive cold, the mirror's dark secret, the cigarette smoke that wasn't mine. My co-workers offer jokes, not solace. Another van is a financial impossibility. I'm caught between livelihood and sanity. Quitting whispers seductively. Perseverance argues necessity. But each recurrence of that pressure, each glimpse of that shape, erodes my resolve. Tomorrow demands another early start, another day confined within that rattling shell. I don't want to go. Bills, however, are relentless creditors. How this ends, I cannot fathom. For now, I close my eyes, praying for a sleep empty of the figure waiting patiently in the back seat of my van. A faulty drape, a simple snag in the fabric. Who could fathom such a trifle unraveling into the most harrowing night imaginable? Yet there I stood, volition stolen by fear, transfixed as the silhouette in the window across the courtyard returned my gaze, unwavering. Horror, I discovered, rarely trumpets its arrival. It insinuates itself, a silent tide creeping in when vigilance slumbers. My name is Clara. Business, a week-long affair of tedious necessity, had brought me to the Meridian Inn. No palace, this, but one of those ubiquitous urban lodgings, functional, clean, the sort chosen when corporate economy dictates the terms. Sunday night found me deposited there, travel-weary to the bone. A swift shower, then oblivion in bed, the room's particulars barely registering beyond its view onto an internal quadrangle of brick and glass. Monday evaporated in a haze of presentations and forced smiles. Returning to my room that evening, feet protesting, head throbbing a dull rhythm against my skull, I craved only the solace of hot water and the release of sleep. It was as my hand reached for the curtain cord that I saw him. Directly opposite, framed in his own window, a man, standing, watching. Our eyes locked across the intervening space, and an involuntary shiver traced its path down my spine. Something in his stare felt aberrant, too potent, too deliberate. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked the curtains shut, my heart suddenly performing frantic tempos against my ribs. Coincidence, surely. Just another guest, glancing out at the precise moment I did. Yet a residue of disquietude lingered, refusing to dissipate. Sleep proved elusive. Each footfall in the corridor, every groan of the building's old bones, became a potential harbinger. His eyes, I imagined them, burning through the fabric, through the night, finding me. Morning light brought a measure of rationality. My nocturnal anxieties seemed theatrical, overblown. I immersed myself in the day's demands, consciously pushing the window incident into the recesses of my mind. But the unease returned with the evening shadows. A strange reluctance gripped me as I approached the window, a half-formed fear of confirmation. Nothing. The room opposite remained inert, its drapes drawn tight. A sigh escaped me, a breath I hadn't realized I held captive. See? Nothing. I'd just spread work documents across the bed when peripheral motions snagged my attention. A flicker. The curtain across the courtyard trembled. A minuscule betrayal, yet enough to freeze me mid-motion. Slowly, with an almost unbearable deliberation, the fabric parted, and he was there. The same man, lurking in the dim interior, his gaze locked unerringly onto mine. I recoiled, heart hammering. This defied coincidence. I slammed my own curtains shut with violent finality and sank onto the bed, struggling to marshal my racing thoughts. The front desk. What complaint could I possibly voice? A man looked out his window. They'd dismiss me as hysterical. Work became impossible. Concentration fractured. My eyes kept darting towards the heavy drapes, anticipating a shadow, a presence. Around midnight, conceding defeat, I prepared for bed. But as I stood clad only in pajamas, a sound sliced through the room's quietude, chilling the blood in my veins. A sharp rap on my door. I remained utterly still, hoping it was auditory illusion. It came again, firmer this time. "Housekeeping," a muffled male voice announced. My brow furrowed. Housekeeping now? "No, thank you," I managed, my voice betraying a tremor. "I'm quite all right for tonight." A pregnant pause hung in the air, followed by the soft retreat of footsteps. I released a ragged breath, fumbling to double-check the deadbolt. Sleep was now a forgotten country. I positioned a chair to face the door, every creak and sigh of the hotel amplifying my tension. Towards 2 a.m., exhaustion began its insidious campaign against fear, my eyelids drooping. Just as I contemplated the relative safety of the bed, I heard it, the distinct, unmistakable click-whir of a key card sliding into my door lock. My heart vaulted into my throat. Paralyzed, I watched the handle depress, the door inching inward. Instinct overrode thought. I lunged, throwing my weight against the wood, slamming it shut. A surprised grunt sounded from the corridor. "Who is it?" I yelled, voice shrill with panic. "Security is on its way." A desperate bluff. My phone lay uselessly on the nightstand. Yet it seemed to work. Hurried footsteps echoed, fading down the hall. Trembling uncontrollably, I slid the security chain across its track and finally snatched up my phone, dialing the front desk. The night manager's voice, initially laced with boredom, sharpened with concern as I recounted the events. He promised immediate security assistance. The guard who appeared, a stolid, middle-aged man named Silas, listened with a furrowed brow. His inspection of the hallway and the door's electronic lock yielded nothing. "The system log shows no entry attempts, miss, other than your own key," he explained, a hint of doubt coloring his tone. "Are you certain you didn't perhaps mishear?" I insisted, vehemently, but saw the skepticism hardening in his eyes. He pledged extra patrols on my floor and departed, leaving me once more to the silence and my fear. Sleep was unthinkable. Every shadow pulsed with menace, every distant noise a potential threat. Dawn arrived, not as a relief, but as the grim end to a vigil. The urge to flee, to find another hotel, warred with the sheer exhaustion and the looming schedule of meetings. And again, daylight cast a dubious filter over the night's terrors. Had I imagined the key card? A simple mistake? Another guest fumbling at the wrong door? I resolved to stay, but not passively. I requested a new key card from the front desk, explicitly forbidding them from disclosing my information. A sturdy rubber doorstop, purchased from a nearby store, became my new sentry, wedged tightly beneath the door each night. The curtains remained resolutely closed. For 2 days, an unnerving calm prevailed. I began to breathe easier, entertaining the notion that stress and fatigue had conjured the phantom threats. Thursday night arrived. Preparing for bed, the mundane routine felt almost normal until my phone vibrated with an incoming text. Unknown number. The message contained only 3 words: "I see you." Ice formed in my veins, arresting my breath. A mistake. Wrong number. That was the only possibility. I clung to that fragile hope until a second message chimed through. "Blue suits you." My gaze dropped to my pajamas. Blue, then flew to the heavy sealed curtains. How? Hands shaking violently, I called the front desk again. The night manager answered, his voice a flat monotone. "This is Clara Hayes, room 412, I began, striving for composure. Someone is harassing me, sending texts. They know what I'm wearing, but my curtains are shut tight. Is there any way, any possible angle someone could see in?" A protracted silence stretched over the line. When the manager finally spoke, the boredom had vanished, replaced by something colder. "Miss Hayes, please remain in your room. Secure the door immediately. I am contacting the police this instant." "What? Why?" Panic surged, raw and overwhelming. "What is happening?" "Miss Hayes," he enunciated slowly, each word a separate drop of dread. "The Meridian Inn doesn't have a guest registered in room 412. Your room is 417. The phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering onto the carpet. Room 417. The room they'd moved me to. The room I thought impervious. A faint noise behind me, a rustle, a scrape, made me whirl around. Emerging from the shadows of my own closet stood the man from the window across the courtyard. A smile twisted his lips, and clutched in his hand, something caught the dim light, the unmistakable glint of a knife blade. "Hello, Clara," he murmured, his voice soft, intimate. "I've anticipated this moment all week." What followed was a maelstrom of pure terror and instinct. Screams tore from my throat as I hurled a lamp, a book, anything within reach. My legs burned, propelling me down the corridor. the man a terrifying presence just paces behind. The stairwell door. Somehow I reached it, plunged through. Down I flew, steps blurring beneath me, lungs searing, his footfalls a relentless echo in the concrete shaft. Bursting into the lobby felt like surfacing from crushing depths. My screams finally found purchase. The night manager stood frozen, aghast, and beyond him, luminous under the lobby lights, stood 2 police officers, just stepping through the entrance, apparitions of salvation. His capture was swift, though not without struggle. As they led him away, cuffed and subdued, the fragments of the nightmare began to coalesce into a horrifying reality. Julian Vance, wanted across 3 states, stalking, assault, attempted murder. His trade, freelance maintenance. His method, exploiting his access to infiltrate hotel security networks, selecting a target, hacking into their room's hidden surveillance camera. Days spent watching, learning routines, waiting. In his room, police discovered a laptop filled with footage streamed directly from my room. Both rooms. They found other things too, sickening mementos from those who hadn't escaped. I was intended as his latest acquisition, a grand culmination before he vanished to weave his terror in a new city. Later, wrapped in a coarse shock blanket in the unnervingly bright hotel lobby, giving my statement, the tremors wouldn't cease. How long had his unseen eyes been upon me? How many times had he slipped into my room while I slept, oblivious? The sense of violation was a physical sickness, profound and deeply unsettling. The ensuing days and weeks blurred into a landscape of police interviews and legal proceedings. Recovery was a slow, arduous path. Shadows held menace. Sudden sounds provoked flinches. Hotels became landscapes of potential dread, each room demanding meticulous inspection for unseen lenses. Yet gradually, with therapy and the passage of time, healing began. I learned the weight of intuition, the necessity of heeding that quiet internal alarm. My experience fueled an unexpected advocacy, pushing for enhanced hotel security protocols, for rigorous vetting of personnel. Years have passed. The Meridian Inn remains a scar on my memory, a chilling reminder of the precipice upon which I stood, how narrowly I avoided becoming another statistic, another name attached to a monster's collection. Now, when travel is unavoidable, I register under an assumed name. I conduct exhaustive room searches, and the curtains, they remain inviolably closed, because the most terrifying lesson learned in that sterile hotel room was this: sometimes the danger isn't peering in from the outside. Sometimes it's already inside, concealed in plain view, patiently awaiting its cue. Midnight found the shape coalescing in the uppermost window, a sentinel of stillness gazing directly down. My own mind, frayed thin by a day of hollow negotiations, craved only the oblivion of sleep. Here I stood, ensconced on the 4th floor of this relic of neoclassical ambition, marooned in a quiet downtown artery. Its weather-beaten exterior, a tapestry of chipped columns and a ponderous wooden portal, hinted at the faded grandeur within. The lobby itself exhaled the past, spectral scents of forgotten upholstery mingled with the sight of peeling damask on the walls, while floorboards groaned their ancient complaints beneath my feet. My room offered little respite, steeped in the ghost of stale fibers and the sharp tang of cleansing agents. The suitcase landed with a soft thud beside the bed. I summoned a weak glow from the lamp near the window, attempting to banish an encroaching sense of dissonance. The first glimpse felt like illusion. Leaning against the cool glass, my gaze wandered over the opposing rooftops before ascending the facade of my temporary lodging. There it materialized, the distinct outline of a human form, utterly immobile, its focus fixed unwavering upon me. No gesture, no wave, merely presence. A frantic drummer took up residence beneath my ribs. An invisible hand constricted my breathing. Was this fatigue painting phantoms on the night? I blinked, rubbed the weariness from my eyes, looked again. The watcher remained. 10 minutes later found me downstairs. The lobby, vast and dim, housed only a solitary night sentinel slumped behind the reception desk, his shirt a roadmap of wrinkles, his visage etched with profound indifference. I inquired about the summit floor, his brow furrowed, a cartographer lost in familiar territory. That eyrie, shuttered months past, he declared, condemned by caution, locked against intrusion, safety concerns, he mumbled, no soul permitted entry. I recounted my observation, the figure stark against the glass. He offered a shrug, a gesture dismissing my account as easily as swatting a fly. A trick of the mind, perhaps, or the city lights painting illusions on the pane. His attention drifted back to his digital domain, leaving me adrift in the echoing silence. Unease accompanied me back to the 4th floor. The image imprinted itself behind my eyelids, that unwavering silhouette, the ritual of brushing teeth, the splash of hot water on my face, small comforts failing to quell the tremor in my hands, the dryness coating my tongue. Each blink resurrected the silent observer from above. Relaxation proved elusive. Sinking onto the bed, I extinguished the lamp. The encroaching blackness amplified every creak, every whisper of the old structure. Rough linen chafed against my skin. The pillow breathed a faint perfume of antique fabric softener. My own pulse thrummed a loud counterpoint in the quiet. An hour dissolved in restless repositioning before I surrendered. Parting the curtains, I scanned the street below, a ribbon of asphalt sparsely threaded with passing vehicles. Tilting my head, I sought the uppermost window once more. Vacant. A breath escaped, part relief, part bewildered query. Where had the watcher gone? If that domain was truly sealed, what apparition had held me captive? Forget it, urged reason. Yet a deeper current, a nagging insistence, pulled at me. I needed to see that floor. Shoes slipped on, keycard clutched, I ventured into the corridor, bathed in the jaundiced, stuttering glow of antique fixtures. The heavy stairwell door yielded with a protesting groan. An exhalation of dust motes and the faint, chemical tang of bygone renovations filled the space. Floor after floor ascended, the 5th revealing carpet stripped back to expose fractured tiles beneath. Here, paint curled from the walls like sunburnt skin, testament to prolonged neglect. Finally, progress halted before an impassive grille of cold iron, barring the way upward. A stark sign warned trespassers away. My fingers tightened on the cold bars, eyes straining to pierce the Stygian gloom beyond. Little revealed itself. A single, faltering overhead bulb cast intermittent light on a long corridor lined with closed doors. Pressing my ear to the metal, I listened. Silence reigned, thick and absolute. Then a whisper of sound, the measured cadence of solitary footfalls echoing faintly from the darkness beyond. A prickling chill traced the length of my arm. My breath hitched. The urge to call out warred with a sudden, paralyzing caution. Adrenaline surged. I tested the gate, a futile gesture against the heavy chain and padlock securing it. Gazing again into the corridor, each flicker of the dying bulb seemed to animate shadows at the far end. My pulse hammered against my throat. A film of cold sweat beaded on my forehead. Thoughts collided. Who paced those forbidden halls? Why the clerk's adamant denial? Retreat. Down the echoing stairwell, my own breathing unnervingly loud. The lobby held a different guardian now. An older sentinel occupied the desk, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. Again, the inquiry about the top floor. Again, the familiar refrain. Renovations, restricted, unoccupied. I pressed, mentioning the footsteps. Another shrug waited with weariness. The building breathes, you see. Old bones settling, pipes singing their ancient songs. He offered no solace, only the hotel manager's card and a suggestion to call come morning. Nearly 2 a.m. Defeated, I returned to my room. Sleep remained a distant shore. My phone screen offered sterile distraction. The television murmured unnoticed. The thought of seeking fresh air surfaced, yet an invisible tether bound me to the building, to the unresolved enigma above. A strange magnetism drew me toward that sealed floor. Around 3, from the wall behind the headboard, a delicate percussion began. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, rhythmic, insistent. It ceased, then resumed. Ear pressed against the plaster. Nothing definitive. Imagination, perhaps? Yet the certainty felt absolute. These old walls, thin membranes between worlds, surely transmitted more than plumbing's groans. Out of bed again, window opened. Leaning into the cool embrace of the night air, my gaze sought the summit once more. Darkness reigned. I extended further, the breeze sharp against my face. A brief pulse of illumination flared in the uppermost window, then vanished. My stomach clenched. Was it the Watcher, glimpsed for an instant before retreating into shadow? Hands gripping the sill, eyes straining against the dark. The light was gone as swiftly as it appeared. A new strategy formed. Phone flashlight engaged, I left the room again, seeking an alternate path. Down the corridor I crept, past silent doors occasionally humming with the low thrum of televisions. Near the hall's end, a door marked Staff Only. The handle turned, unlocked. Inside, another stairwell, this one steeped in neglect. The air hung thick and musty, laced with the scent of decay and festooned with silken shrouds spun in corners. It felt colder here, abandoned by the building's warmth. My phone's beam sliced upwards, illuminating cracked plaster and skeletal pipes. The steps were steep, narrow, treacherous. 2 flights climbed, another locked gate materialized, this one older, its chain bleeding rust. I paused, breath held captive. A faint scritch, scritch, drifted down, the sound of something dragging across a rough floor. It emanated from directly above. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth turned to desert sand. The light beam probed the gaps, revealing only a few feet of corridor. The scraping ceased. Silence returned, profound and heavy, broken only by my own shallow, rapid breaths. Call out? No. Silence felt safer. If an interloper, human or otherwise, lurked above, anonymity was my shield. Gently, I tested the chain. It rattled ominously. A stronger pull yielded nothing but a slight give in the door behind the gate. The gate itself remained fast to the railing. Sweat slicked my palms. I wiped them on my trousers. A wave of anxiety washed over me, the building itself seeming to hold its breath around me. My phone's battery indicator dipped, the light weakening, deepening the shadows and my tension. The watcher's face, or the memory of its impassive stillness, seemed to wait around every turn. Slow breaths, counted meticulously. Backtracking seemed the only sane option. Morning and the manager would have to suffice. Inside my room, the deadbolt slid home. I stood in the darkness, gathering myself. My gaze flew to the window, still ajar. I secured it, drew the curtains tight, severing the visual link to the mystery above. Perched on the bed's edge, I watched my phone slowly recharge from its critical 15%. Fatigue weighed me down, muscles aching from the climbs. Around 4, a dull thud resonated from the corridor, abrupt and final, like a heavy door slammed shut. Instantly alert, heart restarting its frantic rhythm, I cracked my own door. The dimly lit hallway stretched empty. Cautiously, I stepped out, leaving the door slightly ajar. Silence. A few steps toward the service stairs I'd used earlier. The door stood closed. I tried the handle. Locked. The sign now seemed less a notice, more a pointed declaration. Staff only. Authorized personnel. Frustration flared. Someone had secured it in my absence. One last check. The main staircase. My footfalls muffled by worn carpet. I traversed the floor beneath the weak, yellow glow of an old brass chandelier. Pushing open the stairwell door, I peered upwards. Flickering lights, a draft of chill air. My phone's beam climbed the steps. The iron gate remained, locked and impassive. No movement, no sound. Yet the phantom rhythm of those earlier footsteps still echoed in the quiet moments. Imagination conjured figures lurking just beyond sight. My stomach tightened, a knot of fear and fascination. Logic screamed retreat, urged patience until dawn. Yet a deeper current whispered of secrets held tight within these walls, a wrongness that permeated the very plaster. Stay? Flee to another hotel? Obligations held me fast for another day. My watch read nearly 4:30. Exhaustion finally claimed victory. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind aching muscles and heavy eyelids. Back in the room, door locked, lights defiantly on, I surrendered to the bed, pulling the covers close. My pulse remained stubbornly high, thoughts refusing to settle. I traced the ceiling cracks with my eyes, ears straining against the silence, catching only the distant chime of an elevator, muffled voices from other rooms. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, sleep's tide pulled me under. Waking near 9 felt like surfacing from murky depths. Stiffness claimed my limbs. My mind felt fogged. A shower's heat helped sluice away some tension. Dressed, manager's card in hand, I descended. The lobby hummed with morning activity, guests departing. A different face greeted me from behind the desk, offering a polite smile. I requested the manager. He was summoned from an office behind reception. Waiting near a worn sofa, tapping my foot, the night's events replayed in disjointed fragments. Would daylight reveal anything in that top window? A man in a suit approached, introducing himself. I recounted the night's chronicle. The watcher, the footsteps, the locked barriers. His demeanor was a study in practiced neutrality. He thanked me for the information, promised an investigation, reiterated the official narrative. The floor, a dormant beast, sealed and silent. No guest access possible. He'd check for breaches, unauthorized entries. No alarm flickered in his eyes, only measured corporate calm. His composure was a wall. I sensed further questions would be deflected. Outside, seeking breakfast at a nearby cafe, I tilted my head back. The top-floor windows stared blankly, panes coated in dust. Morning light rendered the building ordinary, almost benign, yet the phantom pressure in my chest, the faint tremor in my hands, remained. The day unfolded in a blur of downtown meetings, focus continually fractured by intrusions from the night before. My phone history chronicled futile searches for hotel lore, yielding nothing to explain the watcher. Late afternoon brought profound weariness. A resolve formed. Any further nocturnal disturbances would warrant another confrontation, a demand for answers. What exactly dwelled on that summit floor remained an unsettling question mark. Replaying the instant my eyes met that static form, the memory of echoing footsteps lodged deep within me. No children played spectral games. No tales of recent demise circulated. Yet an undeniable wrongness clung to that sealed level. Perhaps illusion, perhaps a trespasser unseen by indifferent staff. Their placid denials resonated falsely. Even now, recalling that window evokes a prickling awareness at the nape of my neck. The shape persists in memory, motionless, observing. No other experience has so profoundly shaken my faith in my own senses. The indelible sensation of being watched from that void, that supposedly empty chamber, lingers still, an unanswered question etched onto the fabric of the night. Against the bruised canvas of the storm-torn sky, the shack clawed upwards, a skeletal finger pointing at the tempest. Lightning ripped the veil of night, etching its decrepit timbers and vacant window sockets onto my retinas, before darkness swallowed it whole again. Rain, cold and insistent, needled my face. Was this sanctuary or snare? A fool's gamble, perhaps, yet the wind's teeth gnawed. My clothes were a sodden shroud, and choice had fled down the gale-swept path. A shuddering breath, then steps towards the groaning threshold. Solitude hadn't been the plan. Companionship had dissolved last minute, leaving Alara to chase the trail alone. Fortune favors the bold, I'd murmured that morning, beneath a sky like moody slate. Hubris, pure and simple. These peaks breathed caprice, and the squall had ambushed me. Now, shoving against the cabin's warped door, a hinge screaming like a tortured soul, I cursed that reckless spark within me. Anyone within? My voice, a frail thread against the storm's roar. Silence echoed back, thick with dust and neglect. The flashlight beam sliced the gloom, illuminating motes swirling like disturbed ghosts. A skeletal table, twin chairs askew, the iron gut of a stove cold in the corner. Gossamer shrouds clung everywhere. Floorboards sighed underfoot like ancient bones. Yet, even derelict, it offered refuge from the elemental fury. My pack thudded onto the table, the sodden weight of my jacket peeling away like dead skin. Dry clothes first, a small mercy that the pack's lining had held. As I changed, the damp chill replaced by the prickle of unease. A distinct sensation crawled up my spine. Observation. Eyes unseen, boring into me from the shadowed corners. Imagination, I hissed, a charm against fear. But the cabin whispered otherwise. a tumbler on the table, beaded with moisture, too fresh for abandonment. Near the stove, a patch of floorboards held a phantom warmth, the ghost of a recent fire. And then, the most unnerving caress of sound, a faint, metronomic tick-creak from the floor above. My throat constricted. "Hello?" The call louder now, sharper. "Is someone upstairs?" The rhythmic creaking ceased instantly. Silence slammed down, broken only by the rain's frantic drumming on the roof. I held my breath, ears straining against the tempest's voice, a pause pregnant with dread. Then, undeniable, deliberate, the soft thud, drag, thud of footfalls pacing the upper floor. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Company, uninvited. Flashlight beam stabbed upwards. "Forgive the intrusion," I managed, striving for calm. "The storm, I needed shelter, no harm intended." The air remained heavy, expectant. Whoever resided above offered no reply, only the palpable weight of their listening presence. "I'll depart with the storm's passing," I added, voice trembling slightly. "I won't disturb anything." Nothing. The beam lowered. Flee back into the tempest? Madness. The elements were a known killer. This was merely unknown, for now. Spreading my sleeping bag near the far wall, a calculated distance from the stairs leading upwards, I settled into a tense vigil. Flashlight clutched tight, pocket knife a cold, inadequate comfort beside me. Time bled away in fractured sleep, each waking a jolt back to hyper-awareness, listening. Sometimes, only the storm's diminishing size. Other times, subtle shifts from above, the groan of wood under weight, a whisper of fabric. Once, a chillingly close sound, like breath held just beyond the stairwell's lip, sending ice through my veins until it receded. Then, deep in the pre-dawn stillness, a change. The rain had ceased, leaving a vacuum of silence. I sat up, rubbing sleep grit from my eyes, reaching for the light. A click, a beam cutting the dark, and behind me, a floorboard's sharp protest. I spun, heart seizing. Silhouetted at the stair base, a form stood, sentinel, vague yet undeniably present, impossibly tall, elongated, utterly still. "Who?" The word dissolved on my tongue. The shape remained inert, a column of shadow absorbing the light. I scrambled back, table a flimsy barrier. "Who are you? What is it you want?" My voice, thin and brittle. Slowly, agonizingly, an arm lifted, impossibly long, and pointed, first at me, then unequivocally at the door. "Leave?" the question choked out. A minute inclination of its unseen head. Affirmation. No second invitation needed. Backpack snatched, sleeping bag abandoned. Edging sideways, flashlight unwavering on the static form, I crab-walked towards the exit, the figure a silent, looming judge, its arm an unmoving directive. My hand closed on the knob. Just then, creak from upstairs. A cold certainty flooded me. The pacing footsteps, the breathing, hadn't been this sentinel. Another dweller resided above. The door ripped open. I plunged into the gray, rain-washed dawn. The storm had scoured the world clean. Down the muddy track I fled, lungs burning, terror a spur at my heels. Only when distance offered a fragile shield did I risk a glance back. Framed in the cabin's dark maw stood not one, but two elongated silhouettes, watching my retreat. Wrongness radiated from them, even across the clearing. I didn't linger. The path blurred beneath my pounding feet until the sanctuary of my car was reached. Mind fractured, replaying the impossible height, the silent command, the dual watchers. What were they? Phantoms? Or something worse? Something terrestrial, yet utterly alien? The rising sun painted the peaks in hues of false innocence. Driving away, I tried sealing the memory in a vault of denial. Exhaustion, fear, hallucination, convenient lies. But the chill lingered, a permanent frost on my soul. Who would lend credence to such a tale? Silence became my shield, or I never sought the high trails alone again. And derelict structures, once intriguing, now pulsed with latent menace. Emptiness, I learned, is often just a veil. 5 years dissolved, the memory carefully curated into a near-forgotten nightmare, a product of stress and isolation, until a folded local gazette, idly scanned over coffee, a brief column easily missed. Hikers vanish on Ridge Trail. Last known vicinity, an old remote cabin. That cabin. My breath hitched, their gear found neatly inside. The hikers themselves, erased, no struggle, no clues, just absence. Authorities perplexed. My gaze snagged on the accompanying photograph, blurred and indistinct, yet unmistakable within the cabin's threshold. A tall, tenebrous shape, and peering from the deeper gloom behind it, another. The paper slipped from numb fingers. The carefully constructed dam of denial crumbled. They were real. They waited still, and the cold truth settled. I hadn't escaped unscathed. I had merely been permitted to leave. The varnished timber beneath my fingers slickens, a clammy confession. My own pulse hammers, a frantic drum against bone, warning me away. 6 o'clock has bled into evening, and down on Elmwood Avenue, mere strides from my own doorstep, the much-whispered-about gallery has unlatched its doors. I find myself adrift in a stark channel of bleached walls under unforgiving light. The air, sharp with new paint and gleaming polish, carries a phantom undertone, sickly sweet, elusive, like overripe fruit left to fester. Whispers had preceded this place, murmurs of an unseen collection the proprietors kept veiled in silence. I'd envisioned finding solace for my living room's vacant walls, an anchor of warmth against the stark emptiness of my recent move. What I encountered wasn't warmth. Initial canvases offered bland abstractions, forgettable smears of landscape, but the gallery deepened, its passages constricting, revealing stranger fruit. Before me now, a towering rectangle of canvas, raw-edged, leaning against the plaster. Figures cluster within, draped in shadow cloth. Their forms are sharp, yet their faces, smudged into oblivion, replaced by smooth, blind ovals of putty-colored paint. They congregate on a murky street, bathed in the jaundiced glow of a lone street lamp. No gore, no explicit threat, just wrongness. A chilling certainty grips me. Their blankness is aimed squarely at me. A difficult swallow clicks in my parched throat. Silence reigns, broken only by the sterile sigh of the climate control. The adjacent canvas echoes the theme. 3 shapes hunched around a table, their anonymity stark against a crudely rendered, smeared backdrop. Their eyelessness presses in, a palpable scrutiny that pierces deeper than any gaze. My gut clenches. I push onward, attempting composure. Yet lingering invites that pervasive sweetness to bloom, thickening the air, the ghost of candied fruit decaying, a perfume soured on the vine. A tremor starts in my legs. Air. I need air. Perhaps a washroom, cold water on my face. Rounding a bend reveals a deeper recess, dominated by a single significant piece. Above, the track lights hum a low thrum. This canvas boasts a frame of ostentatious gilt, buffed to a mirror sheen. Its surface, slick with varnish, throws back the light, capturing my own warped visage as I draw near. Cautiously, this one stands apart. A solitary figure inhabits a shadowed interior, faceless like the others, yet its posture, shoulders squared, angled towards the viewer, speaks of anticipation. Behind it, the gloom hints at patterned walls, a tapestry perhaps. Leaning in, my reflection momentarily fuses with the figure's blank headspace. A startled jump in my chest sends me reeling back. Was that real? My features, superimposed for an instant where none should be. A cold tingle spiders up my spine. The corridor remains utterly deserted. Just the varnish, I insist silently. A trick of light. Stress, the move, sleep deprivation. My nerves are raw threads. This place is just ill-lit, curated by eccentrics. Breathe. I pivot, searching for signs of staff, an information desk, anything, but a faint whisper of sound, shiftant fabric, halts me. Glancing back at the painting, I freeze. The figure's shoulders, aren't they subtly canted now, shifted infinitesimally? My blood surges. Impossible, surely. A dry chuckle escapes me, swallowed by the stillness. Find the entrance, but which way? The halls twist back on themselves. The gallery, unassuming from the street, sprawls labyrinthine within. That cloying sweetness trails me like a shroud as I retrace my steps. Passing the earlier canvases, my stride quickens into urgency. Something is wrong, terribly wrong. Where blank ovals presided, change has occurred. On one, did I imagine it? Nestled in the putty smoothness, a single eye. Rendered with unnerving precision, a hazel iris flecked with gold, it fixes its gaze outward. I scrub at my own eyes. A delusion born of panic? No. I look again. The eye remains. Fear propels me onward, past the trio at the table. They too have woken. 6 luminous orbs now follow my retreat, swiveling in their painted sockets. My breath comes in ragged gasps. The saccharine miasma thickens, a tangible fog coating my throat. My limbs turn leaden. Out of the corner of my vision, a frame quivers, a brief, violent shudder. I blink, and it's still. But now a low-frequency hum seems to emanate from the very plaster around me. Escape. Now. I veer around another corner, praying for the lobby, an exit sign, any mundane marker. Nothing. Only more canvases, each escalating the horror. Eyes bloom everywhere, unblinking, disembodied watchers floating in the void where faces should be. They track my passage, slick with painted wetness, pupils seeming to widen as I pass. My throat seizes. The room spins faintly. Steadying myself against the wall, my palm registers a disturbing warmth, a subtle throb beneath the paint. Is anyone there? The sound cracks, thin and reedy. Silence answers. The frantic drumming in my chest intensifies. An installation? Some elaborate hoax with hidden projectors? But the emptiness. Where is everyone else? The staff? The entrance? The main hall. There was a door near the entrance. I force myself back, past the gilt-framed canvas. I avert my gaze, yet peripheral awareness screams. The figure within, It's not solitary now. A second presence stands beside it, equally featureless save for two newly rendered eyes aimed directly at me. Panic ignites. I stumble into a near run, my shoes clattering on the polished floor, breath catching in my chest. I halt before a smaller piece I don't recall seeing, its frame a riot of gilded serpentine carvings. Within its dark heart float only two eyes, adrift in emptiness. A primal urge surfaces. Cover it, hide those watchers. My frantic gaze finds only a low table bearing a solitary leaflet. Snatching it reveals the gallery's emblem, but inside mere dates and oblique phrases. No artist, no explanation for this waking dread. I discard it, useless. Movement, forward. Finally, a dim red promise. An emergency exit sign at the hall's terminus. I surge towards it. Behind me, a rustle, a sense of the canvases stirring. I don't look back. The cloying perfume peaks, stinging my eyes, catching in my throat like toxic pollen. My hand smashes against the push bar. Freedom. The door yields, spilling me onto the pavement. Night has fully fallen. The air bites, cool and clean against my face, a gasp of reprieve. My clothes cling, damp with cold sweat. A glance over my shoulder. The door glides silently shut. Through the gallery's plate glass window, streetlights cast only my own distorted silhouette back at me. Home. Now. My feet find a rapid rhythm on the concrete. Within my own space, stark walls, the familiar sofa, a lone lamp casting long shadows, the deadbolt clicks home. But the frantic pulse beneath my ribs refuses to quiet. That sensation of being observed persists. I sink onto the couch edge, head cradled in hands, forcing measured breaths. Safe. I must be safe here. Yet, leaning back, my gaze drifts to the vacant expanse of the opposite wall, and phantom eyes swim into focus there, tracking me. I scrub at my face, inhaling faint traces of that sickly sweet perfume, a phantom clinging to fabric and flesh. The apartment's quiet offers no solace, amplifying the faint buzz of the ceiling fixture, making me jump at every creak. Rising, I drift to the window. Outside, the city is a scatter of distant lights. My reflection stares back from the dark pane, exhaustion etched around my eyes, jaw tight. But behind my mirrored self, imagination conjures a formless shape lurking in the room's corner, a violent lurch in my chest. I whirl around, emptiness, just my sparsely furnished room. A choked laugh dies unborn. Something came back with me, not a souvenir, but an infection of the senses. Those impossible eyes, burrowed deep into memory. The watching hasn't stopped. Logic screams impossibility, but the feeling, it's undeniable. In the bathroom mirror, my own reflection seems subtly altered, pupils dilated, unnaturally dark and watchful. Cold water brings no clarity, only tightens the knot of dread low in my belly. Back in the living room, I extinguish the lamp, plunging the space into near blackness. Instantly, a sense of unseen motion prickles the air. The gallery's horrors are imprinted behind my eyelids. The quivering frames, the suffocating sweetness, the silent figures whose faces bloomed eyes meant only for me. How could I articulate this? Who would possibly believe? Yet I know the truth of it. A presence leached from the canvas, trailing me into my sanctuary. Standing rigid in the enveloping dark, I fight the urge to glance at any polished surface, terrified of catching their reflection. The eyes are still present, waiting, suspended in the theater of my mind. Or perhaps closer still, sharing the charged silence of my own apartment, observing every breath I take. That archaic rotary telephone, salvaged from a sun-baked flea market stall years prior, had always been mere set dressing. An artifact, its ossified cream plastic bore a hairline fracture near the coiled cord's junction, and the dial mechanism possessed a sluggish reluctance, catching if spun with undue haste. Positioned on a spindly side table in my living space, it served purely an aesthetic function, a silent homage to bygone communication. No wire tethered it to the wall, no service hummed within its dormant circuits. It existed only as ornamentation, a fossil from a less immediate era. Roughly a month ago, however, the inexplicable commenced. Deep in the night's velvet folds, the telephone rang. Initially, I dismissed it as phantom sound, a figment conjured by the liminal state between waking and sleep. The muffled peal stirred a queasiness deep within me. A glance at my bedside digital display confirmed that hour, somewhere past 2. I levered myself upright, straining my ears against the silence. The ringing ceased. A dream, I persuaded myself. Yet, the following night, it recurred, this time closer to the witching hour of 3. The bell's tone wasn't the crisp summons of a modern device. It was muted, subterranean, as if penetrating dense earth or leagues of water. A shiver traced patterns across my skin. My heart began a frantic drumming against my ribs as I slid from bed. Crossing into the living room, I found the telephone quiescent upon its table, handset nestled firmly in its cradle, the plastic shell absorbing the weak luminescence filtering in from the street lamp beyond the window. Lifting the receiver yielded only silence at first, then a barely perceptible crackle emerged, a low electrical snow, more vibration than sound. I waited, my knuckles white around the smooth plastic. No voice materialized. My throat felt papery. Replacing the receiver, I flicked on every light, banishing the shadows, attempting rational explanations. Residual wiring within the walls, perhaps, or stray radio interference snagged by the old mechanism. Days later, these flimsy theories evaporated. The phone adopted a terrifying punctuality, its summons arriving precisely at 2:47 a.m. nightly. Ignoring it proved futile. 4 or 5 muffled rings would pierce the quiet before lapsing back into silence. My nerves frayed thin. I began anticipating the call, waking minutes before, padding into the living room to stand sentinel in the gloom, staring at the inert object, the pulse in my ears a deafening counterpoint. Then, the ring. A jolt, every single time. My hand, invariably trembling, would reach for the receiver. Each instance brought only static, sometimes punctuated by faint phantom clicks, or a rasping texture that hinted disturbingly at breath. Certainty remained elusive. After a week governed by this nocturnal ritual, I resolved to banish the phone. I carried it down to the building's communal storage locker, depositing it in a dusty corner, obscured by discarded furniture and boxes. Ascending the stairs, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The subsequent night offered blessedly uninterrupted sleep. But 2 nights hence, the ringing returned, pulling me from slumber with a jolt of pure panic. I stumbled into the living room and froze. There, upon its designated table, sat the telephone. More chillingly, a cord now snaked from its base to a wall socket I'd never consciously registered, disappearing behind the skirting board as if burrowed into the very fabric of the building. How? I knew. I had sequestered it below. My hands shook uncontrollably. Reaching down, I wrenched the plug from the wall, lifted the phone. It felt unnaturally cold to the touch, and secreted it deep within my bedroom closet, behind a bulwark of forgotten coats, securing the door with its lock. That night, at the appointed 2:47 a.m., it rang again. Emerging into the living room, my blood ran cold. The phone was back on its table. The closet door remained securely locked, yet the object had somehow migrated. I snatched the receiver from its cradle. Static roared, a brief, violent surge, before diminishing to tiny, intermittent pops. Through this electrical haze, a sound coalesced. My name, Elias, repeated in a low, grating whisper. Elias, Elias, Elias. The receiver slipped from my grasp, clattering against the tabletop. My legs threatened to buckle. Retreating to my bedroom, I slammed the door shut, spending the remainder of the night wide-eyed, listening. Morning light revealed the phone exactly as I'd found it, receiver askew, but the cord once again lay disconnected beside it, silent, inert. A powerful urge to destroy it, to hurl it into the street, warred with an equally potent, inexplicable restraint. Fear was a constant thrum beneath my skin, yet I felt tethered to the object, drawn by an invisible current. Not possession, precisely, but an unshakable gravity, a desperate yearning for coherence in the face of the absurd. I began setting my alarm for 2:45 a.m., embracing the inevitable. Wake, wait, answer on the first ring. This became the rhythm of my nights. Mostly, the line offered only its symphony of static, faint sussurrations, spectral clicks. Occasionally, I'd hold my breath, straining for a recognizable word, a phrase. Sometimes I'd venture questions into the void. Who is this? Or, what is it you want? No intelligible reply ever came. One night stands out, etched sharp by terror. Amidst the usual static, a distinct sound emerged, breathing, slow and deeply labored. I could hear my own breath, shallow and erratic, a counter-melody of fear. My pulse hammered at my temples. "Hello?" I managed, my voice thin. "Can you hear me, Elias?" The response was a sibilant whisper, too faint, too distorted to decipher. I strained to grasp its meaning, but the sound remained infuriatingly murky. Hanging up, I stared at the phone, palm slick with sweat, mind racing in frantic, unproductive circles. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. I drifted through my days at work, heavy-lidded and disconnected. My supervisor, noticing my pallor and distraction, inquired about my well-being. I mumbled excuses about intractable insomnia. Sharing the truth felt impossible, the narrative too ludicrous for belief. Friends might jest about poltergeists or ancient curses, but the reality offered no levity. A pervasive unease settled over me. My own apartment felt alien, the shadows deeper, the silence more profound, even under the midday sun. Every glance towards the telephone was freighted with anticipatory dread. My temper shortened. Restlessness became my default state. Colleagues observed the change, but I deflected their concerns. Another week bled away. In desperation, I contacted a telephone service provider, inquiring about the theoretical possibility of a disconnected line receiving stray signals. The technician on the line sounded bemused, unfamiliar with such phenomena. Radio frequency interference was suggested, a flimsy hypothesis that couldn't account for the whispers, the breathing, my name spoken in the dark. His final advice was blunt: discard the antique. Frustration coiled within me as I ended the call. I nearly followed his counsel. Phone in hand, I walked towards the apartment door, then hesitated, an inexplicable tightness constricting my chest. Defeated, I returned the object to its place. Some intuition, insistent and irrational, whispered that I needed to answer tonight's call. That evening, I attempted a semblance of normalcy. A meager dinner, mindless television, a conscious effort to ignore the clock's slow crawl. I did push-ups on the living room floor, trying to exhaust the nervous energy thrumming through me. Still, my gaze kept snagging on the telephone. Anxiety simmered. My muscles remained taut. Sleep, when I finally sought it around midnight, proved elusive. I lay staring at the ceiling, a prisoner awaiting a known yet terrifying summons. At 2:46 a.m., I rose. The familiar acceleration of my heartbeat commenced. I positioned myself beside the phone. Punctually, it rang. 4 muffled, insistent peals. I lifted the receiver immediately. Static hissed, then abruptly subsided into near silence. "I'm here," I stated, my voice trembling slightly. "I can hear you." A faint whisper answered, seeming again to shape my name. Sweat beaded on my forehead. "I'm listening," I forced out. "What do you want?" The static surged, cresting and falling like ragged waves attempting articulation. For a full minute, I stood rigid, clutching the handset, every nerve stretched taut. At last, a single, garbled word tore through the noise, utterly indecipherable, before the line clicked dead. The rest of that night passed sleeplessly, my gaze fixed on the silent phone. The following day, driven by a desperate need for control, I systematically disconnected every electronic device in my apartment. Television, stereo, lamps, anything that drew power. The phone remained silent during daylight hours, but I sought to eliminate any conceivable source of interference, even scrutinizing the walls for hidden jacks or errant wiring. I found nothing. Night fell, the ritual resumed. 2:47 a.m. The ring. I snatched the receiver, holding my breath. The static felt sharper this time, almost painful against my ear. Indistinct mumbling followed. "I can't hear you," I pleaded, my voice betraying my fear. "Speak more clearly." For a fleeting instant, the static receded, and again, my name emerged. "Elias, Elias, Elias," intoned, slowly, rhythmically. A vice tightened around my chest. My hands began to shake violently. I resisted the urge to hurl the receiver across the room, instead forcing it back onto its cradle, panting, my mind a chaotic buzz of terror and fascination. What did it mean? I took to sleeping on the living room couch, unwilling to risk missing the call. A small notebook lay open on the coffee table, a futile attempt to capture any coherent fragments. Most nights yielded only static and whispers. Sometimes a dry, rasping laugh. Sometimes a cough, startlingly real. Syllables surfaced occasionally, teasingly close to my name before dissolving back into the noise. I scribbled random letters gleaned from the sonic chaos. E, L, S. Meaningless fragments. My apartment descended into neglect. Coffee cups multiplied like fungal growth, testament to my frayed nerves and chronic exhaustion. Meals became hasty, functional affairs, mere fuel for the nightly vigil. My existence began to orbit solely around that 2:47 a.m. call. Social invitations went unanswered, texts ignored. Answers became my sole pursuit, chasing some elusive revelation perpetually just beyond my grasp. My reflection offered a stark portrait. Pale skin, bruised shadows beneath my eyes, rumpled clothes. Every mundane sound became amplified, jarring. The refrigerator's hum, the floorboards creak, sending jolts of adrenaline through me. One night I mustered defiance. When the phone rang, I answered with forced anger. "Stop calling me! Leave me alone!" My voice cracked, undermining the intended ferocity. The static swelled in response, intensifying into a low growl that built to a crescendo, then abruptly ceased. Silence. A fleeting sense of triumph surged through me. Perhaps I had finally broken the connection. Seconds later, the phone rang again, louder, more insistent than ever before. I snatched it up. "What do you want from me?" I hissed. A blast of static punished my ear, making me flinch. Then, the slow, inexorable repetition of my name. "Elias! Elias! Elias!" It sounded closer now, intimate, as if whispered directly into my ear canal. I slammed the receiver down, my hands trembling violently, my body flushed with a volatile mixture of rage and terror. I couldn't endure it, yet I couldn't relinquish it. Over the ensuing week, the nightly call persisted, unwavering. My perception of time grew distorted. I dreaded the approach of night, yet simultaneously craved it, counting down the hours until 2:47 a.m. I found myself pacing the living room, sometimes lifting the receiver prematurely, hoping to preempt the call, to catch something off guard. But the phenomenon adhered strictly to its schedule. When it rang, I answered. My approach varied. Calm inquiry, shouted demands, desperate pleas. The response remained constant, the unnerving soundscape of static, whispers, and the fragmented, chilling echo of my own name. Each call left me depleted and terrified, yet the compulsion remained absolute. I craved a breakthrough, a coherent sentence, an explanation for the intrusion into my sanity. I even attempted to capture proof, placing my smartphone beside the rotary unit, its voice recorder active during the call. Listening back the next day yielded only the ambient silence of my living room, overlaid with the faintest whisper of static from the phone itself. The distinctive ring, the breathing, my name, none of it registered on the digital recording. It was as if the event existed solely for me, amplifying my sense of isolation, trapping me alone within this waking nightmare. Then, a few nights passed, the texture shifted. The phone rang. I answered. The static resolved into a low, resonant hum that pulsed rhythmically against my ear. A long, slow exhalation followed. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice unsteady but present. "I'm listening, Elias." The hum intensified. A soft, shuffling sound came through the line, like fabric rustling, someone shifting position. My scalp prickled. I braced myself for a voice. Instead, the air in the room plunged, becoming instantly, bitingly cold. My breath hitched. I tightened my grip on the receiver. Then, a faint, sharp scraping sound, like fingernails dragged across metal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. The line went dead. I stood there, gasping for breath in the sudden chill, the receiver still clutched in my hand. This spurred one final desperate attempt at disposal. I entombed the phone in layers of thick plastic refuse bags, sealing each layer with swathes of duct tape until it resembled a grotesque parcel. I drove far out of the city, beyond the industrial parks, finding a large, reeking dumpster behind a derelict warehouse. With a feeling akin to disposing of hazardous waste, I heaved the bundle inside. The drive home was fraught, my hands slick on the steering wheel. That night, exhaustion claimed me early. I surrendered to sleep, praying for respite. At 2:47 a.m., The muffled ring dragged me back to consciousness. I shot upright in bed, chest painfully tight. Stumbling into the living room, I beheld it. The phone resting on its table, stripped bare of all plastic and tape. The handset lay beside the cradle, as if recently used. The cord was plugged firmly into the wall. A wave of visceral dread churned in my stomach. My head throbbed. Trembling, I lifted the receiver. Static screamed into my ear. "I can't take this anymore," I gasped, my mouth arid, my voice ragged. The static subsided into a sibilant hiss, and my name returned. Elias. 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 I hung up, stood frozen for a moment, then fumbled for my mobile phone, unsure whom I intended to call. The police? A friend? The futility struck me immediately. How could I possibly explain? Lowering my phone, I simply stared at the malevolent object on the table. So now I exist in the interlude, waiting. 2:47 a.m. approaches, an inevitability casting a long shadow over every waking moment. I feel perched on the verge of some terrible understanding, yet simultaneously sense my grip on reality loosening. My heart accelerates merely thinking about the next call. The apartment confines me. Its walls seem to press closer each day. I resist entering the living room after darkness falls, yet as the appointed hour nears, an irresistible force draws me in. I creep towards the table, pulse hammering, and wait for the ring. It always comes. I always answer. There seems no way to sever this connection, no rational framework to contain it. And nightly, the static seems to clarify. The whispers gain shape and substance. Sometimes, long after I've hung up, I fancy I hear my name echoing faintly in the chambers of my own ears. What happens if I cease to answer? What happens if I continue? I don't know, but the compulsion overrides fear, overrides reason. I lift the receiver every single time, feeling that knot of tension coil ever tighter within my chest. Something demands an audience, and a terrified, fractured part of me desperately needs to learn why.